Welcome everybody to today's seminar. Psst.
Welcome everyone to today's seminar. We have two PhD plans today. The first one is given by Loréna Boisseau, supervised by Montserrat Vila and Irene Mendoza. And it works like every time. We have 20 minutes of presentation by the PhD student, followed by 10 minutes of questions, and then we change to the next PhD student. Have fun.
So, hello everyone, thank you for coming. Today I'm going to present my PhD plan. And as Katarina said, I'm supervised by Montserrat Vila and Irene Mendoza. So the title of my PhD is Acoustic Invasion, Impact of Alien Parakeets on a City's Soundscape. So I want to start this talk by giving a little bit my academic background. So as you can hear, I'm French, and I studied in Paris both for my Bachelor in Biology and for my Master in Ethology. And during my first master thesis, I studied I studied sexual selection in red junglefowl, and specifically female choice. And then, because I wanted to do more masters, I did a second one in Bioacoustics. And this time, I went to the Netherlands in Leiden, and I studied multimodal turn-taking in zebra finches. And since 2024, I'm doing this PhD at the EBD on invasive parakeets. So just to start, so that everyone knows what a soundscape is, it's the acoustic environment. So it means that it's all the sounds at the same place and at the same time. So this includes biophony, geophony, and anthropophony. And in ecoacoustics, we use sound to answer ecological questions. So what we do is we use remote sensing, using autonomous and passive and where it's from. And its introduction and its spread represent a threat, so for ecosystems, for habitats, and for native species. The studied impacts include degradation of habitat, the spread of diseases, and the population decline. However, there is still a new impact that is being studied, and it's the acoustic impact, and there is still little evidence. So now we have the fun part of the talk. So I'm going to play 3 different soundscapes so you can have an idea of what a soundscape is. And we're going to discuss afterwards, and you choose the one you like most, so please vote. So the first one. Okay, next one. And another one. Okay, so now please everyone, can you tell me which one is your favorite? So number 1, okay, number 2, and number 3. Okay, so the first soundscape was from Parque de la Millo, and it was only native species. Sorry, the second soundscape was at Jardines de Guadalquivir here on the Cartuja, and it included invasive parakeets, both species that we have here in Seville. And the last one was not a park, it was in Kansas City, so it's an avenue, and it had parakeets and traffic noise. So this leads us to acoustic invasion, and I'm just going to start by talking about noise. So anthropophonic noise, which is noise, it's not just sound, it's noise, it means it has a detrimental impact. So it has been shown widely to have a detrimental in birds and other animals, and also to have impact on the stress. So that's also for humans, and also problems for development. However, we don't know yet what is the impact of loud invasive species. Is the acoustic invasion a problem? So what we know that an invasive bird can sing more often, daily and seasonally, than native birds. Invasive frog can call louder, and its call can propagate further than a native one. And if we expose native species, both in birds and in anurans, to invasive calls of invasive species from their taxa, they are going to modify their vocalization. So this means that they are going to change the temporality, stop singing, stop calling, or call less. They are going to call louder or less loud, or they are going to call higher or lower. And this is to avoid masking. So next, what is acoustic interference or masking? So here it's the first spectrogram that many of you will see, but it's time by frequency. So it's a visual representation of sound. Here you can see different species of birds, for example, vocalizing in different colors. And they are separate, they all have their acoustic niche, so they vocalize differently depending on the time and depending on the frequency. However, if we have an invader that has evolved outside of the acoustic space, it will have a different acoustic niche and it might overlap. And so it would overlap both in frequency and in time. And this can cause problems. For example, here in Seville, those are two soundscapes that are recorded. You can see the first one has this partitioning of the acoustic space, and the second one is completely dominated by the calls of invasive parakeets. So this is kind of the importance of my subject. And my model species are the rose-ringed parakeets and the monk parakeet. And they are very important, very widely spread here in Seville. So this is a study from 2022 that shows that between 2013 and 2021, the population of rose-ringed parakeet has multiplied by 5, and the population of monk parakeet. So they have spread through all of the city, and they are really loud. I don't know if you've walked in the streets, but you know. So Seville is the perfect place to study those two species and their impact. So now that we're kind of done with the introduction, you understand the importance of this subject. My 3 chapters, which start by a more general chapter, who looks at the alteration of urban park soundscapes by alien parakeets. Then I will be interested in the vocal activity of specifically the parakeets, looking at their dial and seasonal phenology. And finally, I will be looking at the acoustic interference of native species by alien parakeets, as I've said, doing an experiment, this time looking at a causation link between the calls and the impact on the native species. So for my first chapter, so the first question I have is which characteristics of the soundscape, so there's the temporal characteristic, the energy characteristic, how loud, and the frequency are affected by parakeets. Then, does the detection of birds change with the concentration of parakeets? Do we detect less or more native birds with more or less alien parakeets in the soundscape? And finally, are there spatial temporal differences in these patterns? So this is my first chapter. This is what I've done. I've been to 8 different parks in Seville, and I've collected soundscapes of 15 minutes at different points. I use this microphone. It's an audio mouse, so it's very tiny. And I record in the morning, so I go to a park. I go after sunrise, 1 hour after sunrise, to let the parakeets arrive in the parks. And I record for 3 hours, so that the recording period has the same activity of calling, approximately. And then I have 47 points in total, and I record in all 4 seasons. So it means that I visit a park 4 times in a year. So then I have huge amounts of data with this chapter. So I have 15 minutes files that I'm going to cut in 1 minute segment. Why? Because a 15-minute file, a parakeet could be calling at the beginning and stop calling in the middle and at the end. But the soundscape would be completely different. So I need more temporal precision and cut in those 1 minute segments. And then I have to sort through my segments. If there are loud events, for example, cicadas or like a really loud plane, I'm not going to include those segments. Then I do automatic detection. So automatic detection is using an AI. Here it's BirdNet. It's the most famous AI for bird detection. It's going to tell me in my 1 minute segment what kind of species I have and how many times it's detected them. And it's also giving me a confidence score in its detection. And finally, something that is it's not the same thing as automatic detection, it's made separately, is the computation of acoustic indices. Acoustic indices are like diversity indices, but for soundscapes. So what it does is that it takes my audio file and it's going to summarize its complexity into a numerical value. So then I can compare between my files by comparing those values. So there are dozens of acoustic indices. So I can't just take all of them and try and see what happens. I have to choose them based on my questions and based on the characteristics of the soundscape event I want to look at, which are the parakeet calls. So parakeets are really loud. I'm going to give you an example. I chose 4, but here I'm going to present the biophony index. The biophony is the energy in biological frequency. So it's going to take the frequencies where birds vocalize, for example, and it's going to tell me how much energy are those frequencies, is there in those frequencies. So what we expect is that the biophony is going to increase with the presence of parakeets because they are really loud. They add energy in those frequencies. Oh, okay. A bit of a spoiler, so it's fine. Okay, so then I'm going to look at the number of native birds I detect. So I expect that the number of native birds detected is going to be lower with a higher concentration of parakeets. Why? 2 reasons. I detect this number using an AI, and the AI is going to recognize patterns. But if my patterns are of the native birds are completely overlapped by call, it's going to be making it harder for the AI to work. The second thing that could happen is that ecologically it makes little sense for birds to try to vocalize when they are going to be completely masked by the parakeet's call. So they could be avoiding temporarily the moments where the parakeets are calling, or also avoiding those areas where there are high concentration of parakeets. Okay, so now that we're done with chapter 1, chapter 2 is going to be a bit different. Now I'm going to focus on the 2 different species. What I want to do, okay, so what I want to do is look at the daily and seasonal patterns of alien parakeets in Seville using sound. And then, how are those patterns varying between 3 different behaviors that they do: nesting, foraging, and roosting sites, because this is going to depend on the site. I'm going to explain with the map just afterwards. And then, are alien parakeets following the same activity patterns as native species? So, if they follow the same pattern, like I said in the example where I was telling you that there was a bird that was exotic but singing more often and longer than the native birds, it means that there's more chance of overlap. So it could be a problem, and it's important to know. So this is a map of the areas I'm going to record for this chapter. There are parks, and so in the parks there are 2 different behaviors, so foraging and nesting. Nesting is for both species. So the monk parakeets is going to nest in communal nests in palm trees here in Seville. So if there are palm trees in the park, it's possible that there's going to be monk parakeets nest. However, the rose-ring parakeets, they nest in cavities in the trees. So, for example, Maria Luisa is a site where they nest enormously because there's a lot of cavities in those trees. In Alamillo, for example, they are not going to nest. They are going to go forage. So I chose different parks for different activity. Then I chose roosts. So the roosts you see are roosts of rose-ring parakeets at night. They don't go back to their nest. They go to their roost. So it's a communal area with different trees, and the birds go there to sleep all together. And this is for rose-ring parakeets. So what I do is I bring my microphone, so this one, and I tie it to a tree, and I leave it there for 5 months. As I've said, those microphones can be programmed to record autonomously. So when I'm recording in parks, I record 1 minute every 10 minutes, and I record from sunrise to sunset during the day when the birds are active. At roost, it's different. I'm going to record 1 minute every 5 minutes at sunrise and then at sunset, because they are not going to be there during the day. And again, I'm going to do this for one time in each season to see differences across seasons. So, for example, daily vocal activity will look like this. I have one graph with the parks, so recording during the day, and one graph with the roosts, recording in the morning around sunrise, and in the evening around sunset. I'm going to do the same as in the first chapter. I'm going to detect my parakeets using AI. So it's going to look like this. I'm going to be able to tell you like what's the average daily activity during this month. Then I'm going to look at native birds detected. Again, the number of native birds I detect. And it could look like this. And then, again, I can compute acoustic indices that I'm going to choose specifically tailored for this chapter. OK. And then, so this is all observation data. I don't have a causation link. I can just tell you what happens if there are parakeets present. But I don't know if it's because of the parakeets. So I have to do an experiment. And this is what I'm going to do in chapter 3. So in chapter 3, I'm going to do a playback experiment, which means that I'm going to play the shows. I'm going to ask a question, let's say, by playing sounds and saying what happens in the soundscape and in native birds. What happens how do they react? So I'm going to check how different is the soundscape before, during, and after the broadcast of alien parakeet calls. And then I will check if there is a change in the acoustic activity of native birds, a qualitative change or a quantitative change. So I'm going to do this experiment during my research stay in the Netherlands next year at the University of Leiden and the Institute of Biology. This is a lab I visited during my second master thesis. They are a bioacoustic lab, and it's a great area because they have the parakeets. They are also invasive there. And they are also a lab that is specialized in bioacoustics. So what I will do is I will play the parakeets call in the soundscape and see what happens. I'm going to be recording before with, again, the same microphone to keep the consistency in all of my chapters, before, during, and after the broadcast. And then I will use a 2x2 design in areas with presence of parakeets and in areas without. And those recordings will be done in spring when the native birds are most likely to be motivated to vocalize since they are breeding. So the data will look a little bit like this. So we are going to have a before period, a during treatment, so during the broadcast, and after the time, what happens when I stop playing the sounds. So I'm going to, again, look at the native birds detected. So we expect that it's going to drop during the experiment and then slowly go back when they realize that there are no parakeets call in the soundscape. And then looking at acoustic indices, this is going to give us the proof that the changes in the characteristics we observed in the first 2 chapters are actually because of the calls that we are playing. So it's important to check. So I'm at the end of my talk. I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of my schedule. So my first chapter, I'm finishing the data collection at the end of the year in autumn. I mean, very soon. And then I'm going to do the analysis and the writing, and I'm hoping either to finish by the end of the year or the beginning of next year. For chapter 2, the data collection began this summer, and is going to end in spring of next year. And I hope to be finishing this chapter by the end of 2026. Of chapter 3, as I've said, I'm going to visit the Netherlands next year for spring. So I'm going to do it in 2026, and then analyzing and writing for the end of my thesis. So I want to finish this talk by thanking my 2 supervisors, Ila and Irene Mendoza. And I want to thank my future supervisor, Michelle Spearings, who's in the Netherlands. And I mean, I have 1 more minute, but I want to leave you with those take-home messages, which are acoustic interference is an overlooked impact of alien invasive species on soundscapes and on native species. Studying acoustic invasion has ecological implication as well as human well-being implications. So when you go to a park and it's really loud, it's not nice. And people that live next to roads is not nice either. And also, future noise pollution problems could stem from loud invasive species. Thank you very much, and I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you very much, Loréna. We have now 10 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Loréna. That looks really interesting. I'm really looking forward to see where this goes. I have a question. I think it's on your first chapter.
Yeah.
Can you hear me fine, by the way?
I can hear, but if you can speak a bit louder. Yeah.
Okay. So you're using bird nets, right,
Yeah.
to identify the species. Can you tell the difference between a change in the ability of the AI to identify the species or a change in the actual presence of species?
I mean, right now, the only way to do that would be to manually check the recordings where we would not observe native birds, and we would observe a high quantity of parakeets, and then check manually and see what's happening. Is it because they're not here, or is it because they are not detected? This kind of is a new thing we propose, that it could be a methodological problem for people doing long-term monitoring of native species that have problems with loud invasive species, because it could pose a lot of problems with people that want to have proper information, but actually it's like making their detection methods not working as well. So yeah, it would require to do a manual check.
Hi, Loréna. Thank you very much. Your project is really cool, first of all. And maybe, I don't know if it's something that I haven't understood from what you said, or maybe I don't have enough knowledge or how the audioacoustic lab work, but for your chapter 3, wouldn't it be interesting to play the playback of the parakeets in a place, if there is any left, where the parakeets are not physically present?
Where should I play?
Somewhere where the parakeets are not actually present. So like to present the local birds with a novel noise.
Yeah, that's an important question. I mean, there is debate in the bioacoustician community, because if you do that, then it's novel sound for them. So it could be just surprising them, and they're like, "What's happening?" So you have to make sure. That's why I would use a design that is checking between areas where there would be a lot of parakeets and areas where there would not be a lot of parakeets. But there are birds that know those sounds, because you have to make sure that they're not having a very surprise reaction to something novel. It could be done, but then you always have to justify your choices, and be prepared that someone could tell you that it could be just a reaction to something new, and they're scared, for example. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks very much. Just curious to know your opinion about the relative importance of the acoustic impacts compared with other ecological impacts of these species on birds.
I mean, I'm new to the invasive biology field, so I won't have a very, knowledgeable response. But I would say that sound has been overlooked for sure, and there are a lot of loud invasive species, especially because some of them come from tropics, and they have evolved in areas where, if they are in the jungle, they have to have vocalization that are loud enough and of low amplitude enough that they are going to propagate even through a very tight environment. So if you then move those species in an area that's open, those vocalizations, as I've said, would propagate further. They would be louder than the local species. So, we don't know. It could be a high impact, and that's why I did the comparison with noise pollution by human activity, because if we say that human activity is a driver of global change, then invasive species also are. And if we overlook this acoustic side of the subject, we could be missing a lot of important things, especially because the vocal communication is vital for those species. They can't survive without vocalizing to reproduce, to protect their territories, etc. So we have to take it into account, I think.
Because if understood correctly, so you are comparing the dynamics within the different locations across the day, right?
Yeah.
So you have an idea about what happened before the invasion of this species?
I mean, it would be great to have this information. Unfortunately, we don't have it. Maybe we could imagine it by looking at censuses of what kind of species were present in those parks in previous years. But the problem is that we don't know. And again, that's maybe why it's so important to do this kind of, there are simple feed work. You know, you go, you put your microphone, and once you have your way of analyzing that is automatized, you can have those information. And it's so important because I'm gonna give you like a very tiny example. The other day, I visited Granada and I was in one of the very southern parts of the city, and there were already monk parakeets there, and like there were like 5 or 6 palm trees full of parakeets. And just imagine in 10 years if the Alhambra is full of parakeets, it would change your the life of people and the ecosystem. So we have to have this information for protecting and managing protecting native species and native soundscapes, and managing the spread of invasive species.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we move on to our next speaker.
He's a PhD student with us and has been also a technician in EBD before, and he's doing his PhD with Seville.
Thank you, Violeta. Yeah, I'm Raúl Morón López. I've been working here for 3 years, more or less, and I'm also doing my PhD with Montserrat Vila. This time I'm working with plants, and the title of my thesis by now is The Design Behind Invasions, Differential Traits of Exotic Ornamental Woody Plants and Their Implications in Early Stages of Invasions. As you may know, invasive species have been trafficked since the 19th century to new countries, and this is constant among every taxa, but in concrete, vascular plants is the taxa group that adds up more species introductions worldwide, with more than 13,000 species that are actually established somewhere outside their native region. These biological invasions impacts at every level. IPBES reported in 2023 that these biological invasions contributed to 60% of global extinctions, and they also are involved in 80% of the threats to the human well-being. The cost of dealing with these invasions is also fourfold every decade. But well, before being invasive, a species have to cross different barriers, different stages. The first one is the barrier of transport, because some species are chosen to be transported, while some other are not. And also, many species, for example, cannot survive a long trip by plane or something. But if these species reach the new country, they are usually kept in captivity in case of animals, or in cultivation in case of plants, and they have to escape this human control. Also, some of them are directly released in nature, and once they are in nature, they have to survive by their own and reproduce, form constant populations. At this point, when they form constant populations, they are considered naturalized in the new area, and after that, they have to disperse, form new communities, and cause an impact on the recipient ecosystems. This is a terminology that I'm using throughout the whole presentation. The origin terminology is related to if the species is native or alien. Alien means exotic. And the invasion status is basically if the species is considered non-established in natural communities, naturalized, or invasive. And by the way, a species needs to be naturalized to be invasive. Well, among the management actions, IPBES reported that early prevention, early management actions, such as preparedness, early detection, or early eradication, are the most cost-efficient management, and they are basically the only ones that can actually stop the invasions and eradicate the species. Well, regarding plants, which I remember that they are the most established taxa worldwide, the main pathway of introduction is horticulture. Basically, 90% of the 13,000 naturalized plant species worldwide come from horticulture, whether domestic gardens or botanical gardens. And in parks, in horticulture, we choose what we find attractive or what it pleases us the most. For example, we like big leaves or leaves with atypical shapes. Also, colorful or edible fruits, species that need low water requirements. And also, we love scented flowers. I also have a mini game because for that plant characteristics, we can predict if a species is going to be invasive or not. Who thinks? Well, this is a study done by Ana Novoa in invasive cacti, and they have two groups of species. The first one, the one above, has bigger seeds, and the one below has smaller seeds. Which one is the invasive, the above one or the below one? The above one, who thinks is the above one? Okay, 1, 2, 3. And who thinks is the below one? Okay, more. Incorrect. Usually, and weight is a good predictor for biological invasions. And basically, if the species have more energy or more nutritional input, let's say, they can perform better. And yeah, functional, the study of traits is very powerful to predict invasion outcomes. Modern metrics, modern techniques use the concept of space, the niche space, in a functional way. And there are some metrics, just like the functional dendrogram, which basically divides the species by their traits and shows how they are clustered. And space-based metrics use like convex hull or probabilistic hypervolumes show how the complete functional space is occupied by some group of species or others. Well, but even though if functional traits are very good predictors of biological invasions, there are two big knowledge gaps. The first one is that most of studies compare only one functional strategy or only a group of traits that are related between them. And also, few studies tackle the complete invasion process. Some of them refer to native and alien species, or some of them tackle the native species and invasive species, but there are not a big amount of studies that uses the terminology of non-established and naturalized and invasive. Well, my objectives are to explore the differences in morphology, phylogeny, and diversity between native and alien ornamental plants. Also, investigate if these differences are consistent between the regional, the city, and the park level. The regional is basically peninsular Spain. And finally, I will study the association of these differences with socioeconomical and historical variables of the parks. Therefore, I'm dividing my thesis in 3 chapters. The first one is related with aesthetic categorical traits in Spain. The second one, I will study diversity at the taxonomical, functional, and phylogenetic level in Spain. And finally, I will try to link socioeconomical and historical variables and also with the origin and invasive status of the species at the city level. The first chapter, which I remember is related to aesthetic differences, I have 2 main questions, which are basic. The first one is if native species and alien aesthetically. And my hypothesis for this is that, yes, they are different, and actually alien species have more characters and exclusive characters, only because native species are restricted to the peninsular area or the Mediterranean area, and alien species come from anywhere else. And my second question is if invasion status is influenced by, if aesthetic differences is influenced by invasion status. My hypothesis in here is that non-established species have these exclusive characters that are also exclusive for alien species. The second one is that naturalized are quite similar to native species because they need some similar traits to native species that confer them the ability to be able to naturalize. And finally, that invasive species are also similar to naturalized and native species, but they will have extreme characters for certain traits. My methods, basically, I collected my species inventories from this website, vivirlosparques.es, which is provided from for the Agencia Española de Parques y Jardines. And I retrieved 49 parks, in which I found 342 species. Among them, I found around 20% of native species and 80% of alien species, according to their invasion status. Regarding traits, I retrieved aerial traits for aerial organs of the plants. They are all categorical traits, and they are related to the type, shape, color, seed type, and then bark texture, bark color, and canopy shape. Among the most important results, I found invasive species having more bipinnated leaves, such as this Acacia delbata, and less simple leaves, but less than the rest, because we also have invasive species with simple leaves, such as this Budelleia davidi. According to the leaf shape, I found non-established species having more linear shaped leaves, such as this species of the Yucca genus. Naturalized species have had more scale and ovate species. This is a cupressus, and this is Tipona tipo, which is very common here in Seville. And finally, I found invasive species having more lanceolate shaped leaves, like the Eucalyptus genus, which is pretty dispersed around the Iberian Peninsula. And finally, I found differences on flower shapes between alien and native species. Alien species had more catkin. When I refer to flowers, I want to clarify that it's the sexual unit, because obviously conifers don't have proper flowers. But I found basically conifers being more alien, and also sparix shaped flowers, which are typical from palms, and we will see this later. And among native species, I found the glomero shaped flowers being more common, and also compound umbels, inflorescences. This chapter is in press right now on the Ecosistemas journal. It's written in Spanish. And hopping on the second chapter of my PhD, I'm studying the phylogenetical and functional diversity also in Spain. And my research questions are basically comparable to the ones in the first chapter. They are if there are phylogenetic differences among origin and invasion status. And I think that alien species will be more diverse, while native species will be more clustered phylogenetically, basically because the same as before, that native species are restricted to the Iberian Peninsula and alien species come from anywhere else. And the second research question is related to functional differences among origin and invasion status. This time, my hypotheses are that alien species will be more diverse than native species because of the same reason. And among invasion groups, I think that, again, naturalized and native species will be quite similar in stress tolerance, traits that confer the ability to establish in natural ecosystems, and that invasive species will have in traits related to resources, acquisition, and reproduction. Again, I used Vivir los Parques as my repository. I basically refreshed my data, and this time I found 57 parks and 526 species, but the proportion of native species and alien species remains the same. Native species represent the 20% around of the assemblage, while alien species represent the 80%. Regarding traits, I divided my traits in 4 groups. The first one, well, the groups are related to any type of functional strategy. The first one is related to the acquisition and use of resources, and I assessed typical traits such as specific leaf area, height, nitrogen content in leaves, or seed weight, diaspore weight. The second group is related to phenology and reproduction, in which I studied a start and end of flowering period, dispersal and pollination syndromes, and trait amplitude. Trait amplitude is important because it's not only what is the most common dispersal syndromes in certain plants, but also how many dispersal syndromes does a species have. The third group is related to the tolerance of stress, of environmental stress, tolerance to drought, frost, and shade. And finally, I included important traits from the first chapter in here, which are the aesthetic traits. They are all categorical, and there are traits such as leaf shape, flower shape, or fruit shape. For the phylogenetic analysis, I built a phylogenetic tree by comparing my assemblage to a reference megaphylogeny, which is this one. It's a megaphylogeny of every seed plants worldwide. And then I calculated phylogenetic diversity metrics such as phase phylogenetic diversity, richness, variability, and clustering by net relatedness index, NRI, and NTI. Basically, these two indices show different things. The first one, the relatedness one, shows how species are clustered in basal branches of the tree. And the second one shows the clustering in terminal branches of the tree. And we will see that in a second. And regarding functional analysis, I built a functional space following the trait probability density framework that basically stands for that the functional space can a volume of every species in your assemblage, but also the density of how these species are distributed among the functional space is also important. Also, I studied functional diversity, richness, evenness, divergence, and overlap. And I built predictive models to study these differences statistically. Sorry. Again, the trait probability density framework stands for not only taking into account the boundaries of the functional, but also the density of how these species are distributed. This gives interesting results, such as with the convex hue method. Usually the overlap is higher than with the TPD, the trait probability density. Among the results, this is my phylogenetic tree. I don't think you can distinguish any species, but we found some interesting results. For example, among alien species, we found this big family, which are palms, with only one green native species, which is Camerops humilis, here in Spain, and the order Sapindales, which is the order of maples, and they are basically all alien species. Regarding native species, we found this species being clustered in the final branches of the tree. For example, of this Lamiaceae family, which is the family of aromatic plants, or some genuses, such as the Quercus genus. This is the statistics behind the phylogenetic tree. And basically, I found native species being less diverse than expected by chance. And also, they are clustered in the final branches of the phylogenetic tree. Established species follow the same trend as native species, as we expected. And finally, invasive species are clustered in basal branches of the phylogenetic tree, which means that they belong to ancient groups or to bigger groups, and they are also less rich and less variable than expected. Regarding functional diversity analysis, this is my functional space. I'm going to show you for two groups. The first one is the group related to acquisition and use of resources, and I found invasive species being quite related to the leaf nitrogen content in leaves, and the overlap among native and alien species is quite high. It's very, very high. We didn't expect this, but it's okay. And this is the functional space related to the reproduction traits, and we found an interesting climb in here. While non-established are quite related to anemophily. This is I'm only representing here pollination syndromes, anemophily and entomophily. And while non-established species here are related to anemophily, which is very typical of conifers again. Naturalized species were very, very similar to native species, which are in blue in here. They occupy the same functional space. And finally, invasive species, we found an interesting trend, is that they're basically in the middle, but because they showed mixed pollination syndromes. They showed mainly the primary pollination syndrome is entomophily, but they were anemophilous also as facultative. And finally, I'm talking about my chapter 3, in which I will try to link socioeconomic and historical variables to the origin and invasion status of the species, but also on the analysis that I did on the second chapter, on the phylogenetic and functional diversity analysis. To do so, I got species inventories from every park in Barcelona, Bilbao, Madrid, and Seville, and I will study some historical and socioeconomic variables, such as average income per household, depending on the neighborhood in which the park is, or distance to the city center. I didn't start this chapter yet, just for the record. And this is my temporal planning. I already finished my first chapter. I'm finishing my second chapter. I'm writing it and getting some more prettier analysis, let's say. And my chapter 3, I will start it during 2026, in which I will go I will do an international stay in the University of Toronto with the professor Marc Adot, which works with invasive species, and I will analyze the data for my third chapter. Well, this was my PhD project. Thanks to Monse and to the group, and of course to the Gobierno de España for the funding. And yeah, I'm open to questions and proposals. Thank you.
We have time for questions.
So in your chapter 2, all of those parks, they're city parks, right? Or are they natural parks?
No, they are. I only work with urban parks, with public urban parks.
And so when you say that you compared the characters with the expected, how did you determine what is the expected?
With null models, with expected by chance.
By chance based on what though? Like
on the total assemblage.
Of
my, yeah.
Of in urban parks.
Yeah. It's important in my work that urban parks are not invaded areas. They are the first stage in which the species get into a country, in this case Spain, and these communities are very artificial because they are very managed. So yeah, they will every one of them will perform optimally always because they are supposed to. And yeah, we compared this species with species in urban parks with themselves and with new models, because we think that these species will work as constant pool of seeds or pool of propagule pressure to natural areas. So yeah. Whoop. Thank you.
More questions?
We're hungry.
What?
No, just say it.
Okay, so let's call it a day, and thank you very much for coming, and please let's thank Raúl and Loréna again.
Thank you.